We're not going to talk about the gospel today. It was pretty similar to the reading we had last week. And once again, there's a number of exorcisms that take place in the gospel. And to be frank, you can talk too much about that stuff. It's not necessarily the healthiest thing to talk about week after week after week. So instead, let's give St. Paul some of our time and attention today with that second reading. In this second reading, Paul is essentially describing his attitude regarding his job as an apostle. He points out that a preacher is entitled to material benefits. If you work for God, you are entitled to rewards for your effort. And fair is fair. We all got to eat. But Paul makes it abundantly clear that he is not in it for material benefits. He is not proclaiming Christ and spreading the gospel message for any selfish reason. And so he is waiving his rights as an apostle as a testament to his sincerity. Paul loves the Lord, and serving him is its own reward. Paul wants nothing except to bring people closer to God and closer to each other in peace. I read a nifty little story a while back that's kind of touching on this point. In the story, the main character is this guy, and he suffers amnesia. And in addition to everything else happening in the story, he has to sort of reconstruct his personality piece by piece. Some stays the same, some things he chooses to change. And all of this happens in the way of conversations between himself and voices in his head. So basically, every fragment of his personality has its own voice. So he's going about his business, and a voice he had never heard before comes to his attention and says, "Hey, now that things are moving along, now that you're standing on your own 2 feet, I've got a quick question for you. How would you like to be a communist? Because victory belongs to the people after all, and the rich and the powerful aren't going to overthrow themselves. So how about it?" And the man says, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm gonna say no." And the voice goes away. And at first, he thought that this was a one-and-done situation. He thought, well, I guess I was a communist earlier in my life, but now I'm not, and I'm gonna move on. But before long, a second voice comes to his attention and says, "Hello. Well done saying no to communism. Well done. That was the right choice. Communism is for the weak and the cowardly. So I'm here to ask, would you like to become a fascist?" Seriously? You're asking me if I want to become a fascist? Is that a real question? And the voice says, "Hey, don't knock it. Strong government with one guy at the top. You don't waste any time in gridlock or pointless debates. And you have the satisfaction of knowing that you're on the winning team." And he goes, "Hard pass." Voice goes away. And now the guy figured out, I probably have a few more of these to get through, and he was right. A voice asked if he wanted to follow the money, go full corporate. He who has the most toys wins. He says no to that. And a voice said, "Hey, you know what you should do? You should become an anarchist. You should rebel against everyone and everything. Because all people are terrible, so why value them or respect them? Just do what you want and tell other people to do what they want, and everything will work out for the best." And again, he says no. And after that voice went away, he thought he was done. Because at this point, he basically said no to everything in the political spectrum. There wasn't anything left to say no to. But he wasn't quite done. another voice respectfully came up to him and said, "Hello, good evening, sir. I am the last voice that's going to trouble you in this way." And the man goes, "Great. Well, let's get this over with. What are you selling?" And the voice said, "I'm here to ask if you would be interested in devoting your life to righteousness." And the guy was taken aback. Righteousness? Well, that's a shallow thing for you to offer. All those other causes would claim that they were righteous as well, in addition to their advantages and their benefits. And the voice said, yeah, they would claim that. But the reason I'm talking to you in the first place is because you said no to all that other stuff. You know deep in your heart that none of those things were truly offering the complete answer. This is a righteousness that goes beyond any particular cause or group. And the guy still wasn't buying it. He said, "But how can that be? Because righteousness is just an abstract concept, unless you have an agenda to attach it to." And the voice tried to explain it as clearly as it could. It said, "Have you ever felt like the world is tearing itself apart?" He said, "Sure. All those ideologies that approached you, and more besides, all of them are in a never-ending battle of tug of war. And they're all trying to destroy the others, because that's the only way they can win. And the world needs people who are devoted to righteousness, because they're the ones in the middle pulling the world back together again. Unless we have at least a few people working for true righteousness, there wouldn't be much of the world left for anyone except tatters and scraps." So the man thought about what that meant and said, "Well, that sounds awful. So you're saying that if I take your side and follow righteousness, that makes me the automatic enemy of literally everybody else?" And the voice said, "Well, yeah, you're not wrong. You will occasionally have to oppose every other cause or group. But what makes you different is you're not out to win. You're not out to dominate or destroy them. You are out to keep them from destroying themselves. And they will hate you for it." And so the man once again took a step back and thought about what he was hearing and said, "You know, voice of righteousness, you're a terrible salesman." And the voice, again, didn't resist or deny it. He said, "No, you're right. I'm not a very good salesman. Every other decision you could make would probably be an easier one. But that only highlights the importance of this decision. The world needs righteousness." So think about it, and good luck. I realize that there's very little at the surface, very little that's related to St. Paul in that weird little story. But when you look closer, that connection is there. Because Paul served Christ as righteousness. He was pulling people back together, back to God. And it wasn't about belonging to the winning team. It wasn't about any material benefit that a particular cause could give. To be virtuous is its own reward. To be what the world needs you to be, in spite of any resistance along the way. And with so many people trying their hardest to tear the world to shreds, isn't it obvious where we really belong? We belong in the middle of the mess, doing our best to put at least some of the world back together again. And the trick to doing that well is that, like St. Paul, we can't be in it for the money or the prestige or the fame or any of that. We just need to have Christ front and center in our minds. And like St. Paul, if we do that, we will be true servants of God and righteousness, and we will sanctify ourselves, one another, and indeed the entire world.